Hi, everybody.
Hello,
Hello.
hello.
Welcome to our session. So lovely to have you here. Lots of you are joining live, which is amazing. So happy to see you. And I know that there'll be lots of you who have signed up and will be watching this at your leisure on replay. So welcome to you too. So thrilled to have Danae Shell here. Hi, Danae. How are you?
I'm very well. Thank you so much for having me, Katie.
So excited about this partnership and to have you here. In the flexible working community, we have people asking questions all the time about what their rights are, and it's such a tricky area for people. We hear that people are dealing with really tough workplace situations, as we know, things like flexible working requests rejected without discussion, pressures to return to the office, unfair treatment, restructures. There's just all these issues that are going on, and these questions are constantly getting asked in the community.
Yeah.
And people don't really know where to turn for support. And as we know, legal help's really expensive, complicated, intimidating, and people end up doing nothing. So I'm kind of giving this backstory because I want people to understand why we've partnered with Valla and to understand more about who Valla are, why Danae set it up, and also as an opportunity here in this moment for people to ask questions anonymously, or if you're happy to come on camera and ask questions, please do. But I wanted to introduce Danae first of all, because what she's doing is amazing. Danae is the founder and CEO of Valla. And I'm going to give it a bit of a background myself. You're a developer turned marketer from Tennessee. Fantastic. Who spent more than 18 years in the UK tech startup scene. And in 2022, she launched Valla to change how workplace stories end. Again, I love that. And I know you're going to unpack that for us when you tell us a bit more about why you set it up. They've already got over 14,000 people across the UK using Valla to help resolve their issues at work. Danae is also a member of the Law Scot Tech Board for the Law Society of Scotland and sits on the National User Group for the Employment Tribunal of England and Wales. So we're in very good hands here. Um, and we're so thrilled to have you here. And I thought rather than me tell the Valla story, what better than to have you to start by just telling us a bit about yourself and what inspired you to set up Valla?
Yeah, of course. Thank you again. So, the first thing that's useful to know is I'm not a lawyer. There's a little bit of echo, Katie. I don't know if
Oh,
that,
okay. Is
don't,
anyone not on mute that could be on mute?
let's see. Oh, well, I'll keep going. It'll be fine.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so I'm not a lawyer. I'm a technologist, and I was just a woman in tech, to be honest. I've worked in the financial services industry. I was building tools for wealth management people, and then I worked in the accounting industry and got pretty high up and found that often I was the only woman in the executive team, and it was like so many people were coming to me with problems. And I'm American as well. And I was like, wait, we have rights. Like, why can't we do anything about these rights? It was so frustrating. And then I thought, what if we can build something that lets you file a tax return on your phone, surely we could build something that can make this process easier. Because what was so clear was the story kept ending the same way every single time. They just left. They just gave up. They just left. And I think it's because people can't afford to hire a lawyer to look after it for them. And then what other options do they have? And we were like, well, surely they can just do it themselves. It's not the perfect option, but if they could get some more support. So that's how Vala started.
I love that. And I think that's right. I think it's not just about the ongoing, how do I get support from the lawyer? It's a, do I even have a case? And I think that's the
Yeah.
bit where people get really stuck. It's that like, okay, so I feel like this isn't going right. And I'm not sure that I need a lawyer. I don't even know where I'm going with this. So do I just bury it? And that's the question. And I know that Valet isn't a law firm, and that's a distinction. So it'll be really good for you just to chat through what support looks like from someone using your platform and just tell us a bit more about the platform, like how does it work?
Yeah, of course. I've got a little slide. Let me pull that up while we talk about that so people can see a little picture of it. So Vala is essentially a self-representation platform. We help people manage the case themselves, and that literally can go from grievance all the way through to if they need to make it legal. Many people don't. And also, critically, just to keep track of what's happened. And that's completely free, that part. It's called contemporaneous notes. One of the things that I talk a lot about is people don't know that if you just write down what is happening as it's happening, that counts as evidence. And it's free to just write it down in the timeline on Valla. And later on, if you need it, that will be really, really valuable for you if you get into a sticky wicket with your employer. But the way it works is we've got templates, we've got evidence collection and management, we've kind of got lots of guidance and materials, and then we have what are called legal coaches. So these are lawyers, and most of them are solicitors, some of them are Silex accredited, some are HR people who have litigated in the tribunal. They're all litigators, and they don't represent you because we can't afford that. That is like if you could afford for someone to represent you, you go to a law firm. So instead, what they do is they coach you. And so a good example is let's say that you'd filed a tribunal claim and you've got a preliminary hearing coming up. Now, what is a preliminary hearing? Like you've never done it before. How would you know? But our coaches have. And so we have a package where they sit down with you and they say, okay, let's get your documents ready. Here's what the judge is going to ask you. Here's how this meeting works. And so we coach you through every single step of the process like that. And it can go from the grievance meeting or disciplinary meeting or something like that, all the way through. And it works out to be usually about 80 to 90% cheaper than a law firm. It means that the person has to do more work, but it's doable. And the other thing that's maybe useful to know about is that do I have a case? We actually built a tool. So for £149, you can talk to a lawyer for an hour. So basically the way it works is you pay 149, you upload some documents that we ask you for, like, your grievance, anything really, anything that you've got. And we ask, do you have any of these? And just give us what you've got. And then you get an hour-long call with one of our coaches, and we go through and say, okay, here's what we think was illegal about this, and here's what we think wasn't illegal about this. And if there was something that we think you have a valid claim for that could go to tribunal, we'll also give you a price. So here's how much we think you could win in tribunal if you did win. And from there, people are in so much more of a strong position to say, do I want to take this forward? Do I want to try and settle? Like, how much power or leverage do I have? So yeah, so that's how it works.
That's amazing. So let's say that somebody does want to take it forward. Do they then have a lawyer in conjunction? So is that where Valla stops? So Valla will give you, so you can get that early advice on kind of where you stand, what your position, do I have a case? You give lots of resources, but then after that, they can go off and they'll be in a much stronger position to be able to move that case forward. And then, yeah, is that how
We
it
can
works?
support them all the way through.
All the way through.
Yeah, so I'll give you a couple of examples. We just had someone message us today, actually, and say that she had won her case with Vala Coaching. And so she worked with coaches all the way through. And so mainly it's like at these key points, like the preliminary hearing point, and then getting your witness statement together and things like that, and then the final hearing. And you might spend you might buy like 9 hours of coach time along that time to kind of get ready and get them to check your documents and that kind of stuff. But when I first started Vala 5 years ago, 1 in 3 people were representing themselves in the tribunal. It's now 1 in 2, we know anecdotally. So we know that it's more and more people representing themselves using a service like ours. Actually, there are no other services like ours. So using our service or kind of winging it on their own.
Amazing. Okay, and in terms of the documents, you said, I know you've got tons of resources. Just talk us through a bit more about what kind of documents and templates and things that people can expect to see.
Totally. So we have a grievance template and we have this thing called a peace of mind check. So you can use the document, like I think the grievance template is like £20 or something. And we say kind of what's happened, you fill all that stuff in, and then you can pay a top up to get one of our coaches to check it for you. And then we'll come back with feedback. So we can do grievances, appeals. There's a lot of appeals. And then the big one is the ET1. So let's say you've done a case assessment with us and we say, actually, we think you have a claim here. Do you want to do ACAS early conciliation? Say the ACAS early conciliation doesn't work and you need to file your tribunal claim, then we have a template for that. It's £96 and that includes a peace of mind check. And then we have templates for basically if the other side starts playing shenanigans. And
Yeah.
there's lots of different things that you can ask the court to do. And so, yeah, we've got templates for all of those as well, and lots of
Brilliant.
educational material along the way as well.
Okay. So it's just basically an incredibly affordable way and an accessible way for people to start identifying whether or not they've got a case and then just getting support all the way through.
Yeah.
I think before we dive into the questions, which we will do, given that we're a flexible working community, I thought it'd be really useful, and I know you've put together some slides just to talk people through their flexible working rights. So
Yeah.
if you're happy
Yeah.
to share that, that would be ace.
Absolutely. So yeah, let me take everyone through this. Katie,
And
if you go on mute while I'm chatting here, I think the echo might be
is it
coming.
me?
Let's just when I'm not just while I'm doing this bit, it might be helpful. Let's see. Okay, I'm going to share. Cool. Okay. So yeah, let me talk you all through this, and this will give some context when we answer the questions that have been pre-submitted as well. So the main thing that I'm going to focus on for this is your right to request flexible working. Now, there are some other elements of flexible work that I'll talk a little bit about later because this often intersects with discrimination law. So we'll touch on that, but let's focus first on just your ability to make a flexible working request. And that is actually what your right is. It's not the right to flexibly work, it's the right to request flexible work. So I wouldn't say it's the strongest of our employment rights, but it is a right. And I'll show you a case of where somebody requested, was told no, and then won at tribunal, so you can kind of see how the rules work. So first, the kinds of things that you can request is differences in hours, times, the place that you work, like, wanting to work from home, wanting to work hybrid, things like that. Those are the sorts of things that we're talking about here. You do need to make the request in writing, and it is very helpful if you say flexible working request, like be very explicit about the fact that you're making this request. It doesn't have to be like a fancy letter, it can just be an email. You just want to make sure that you've written it down and also take a note of when you did send that email, like take a screenshot or something like that, just in case it gets lost later on. Because that, I'm sure Katie's heard horror stories as well. That can happen. It used to be that you had to wait in order to make a flexible working request, but as of last year, it is now a day one right to make a flexible working request, which is great. And you can do up to two statutory. And when I say statutory, I mean your legal right as an employee to make that request. You can do up to two in any 12-month period. The difference between statutory is contract. So it might be that your employers can give you more rights in your contract. So they might beef up your flexible working rights, for example. But everything we're talking about today is the baseline law, and which, many employers just stick with and some add on top of. Your employer must make a decision within 2 months of your request. And I need to double check if it's 2 or 3. They need to include appeal time in there as well. If you, take into account that you could appeal because you do have the right to an appeal, which is something that sometimes employers don't tell you, and they have to take that appeal seriously. So once you submit that written request, they need to acknowledge it. They need to actually consult with you. So if, for example, if you submit a flexible working request and they come back and they say just no, then fail, they have not followed the guidelines. Like that is, it's almost like a game, right? It's like if they do that one, then they failed. They have to consult with you. They can't say no without consulting with you. And they have got like, I think 6 reasons to say no. Now, these reasons I don't think are particularly strong, but in terms of your rights, like usually if they want to say no, they can try to justify something. But I'll come back to that because that part is beefing up with the new employment rights bill. They need to tell you why, and they need to write it down and communicate that to you, and you need to have the right to appeal. Now, the right to appeal, like you that's that 2 months. I think that includes the appeal time. So you need to be able, like they need to get on this quick. This is great because in some things like grievances, the legislation isn't as clear about how quickly they need to accommodate it. But in this case, they do have a deadline that they need to follow. And so you can hold them to that deadline. And then finally, where we usually see an employer falling down is that they didn't bother trying to go through the process. They didn't bother trying to figure out if they could reasonably accommodate that request. And so if they don't do that, like if they said no without consulting you, if they didn't write to you with a decision, if they missed a deadline and there was no agreement to extend, all that kind of stuff, you can take them to tribunal. And the a maximum award compensation for this particular claim is 8 weeks' pay. And the pay is capped at a certain amount. So the maximum amount is about five to £6,000. Now, I'll just quickly tell you two, I just want to give you two cases. So if this is something that you're going through and you want to really dig into some more detail about this, we've pulled out two cases for you to look at. So this case, if people don't know, employment tribunal decisions are publicly available. They're on a gov.uk page and they are a treasure trove for learning about your rights. Like I direct people to it all the time. And not all of the cases have the full, like blow by blow of everything. Sometimes, often it's just, when lose amount. But in a lot of cases, you do get the blow by blow and you can learn so much. So here's two cases that I want to direct you to. So if you just take a screenshot of these and you can kind of refer back to them. The first one is a case against Tesco. So this is a classic flexible working claim. No discrimination, no other circumstances. This is that 8 weeks, as I described there, claim where basically the employer didn't follow the process correctly, they didn't actually try, and they lost. And so it's a really nice, clean cut example. And what's so great about these cases is that the judge explains in the document why they reached the decision that they did. And so you can then understand that reasoning and kind of apply it to your own situation. So I highly recommend that one as like a clean cut, pure flexible working case. And the other case I want to point you to is that flexible working requests often intersect with discrimination law. So, for example, if you are making a flexible working request because you have a disability, then the employer, they still have to pass the first bar, which is they have to reasonably handle it and do all the stuff that we just talked about. But they also have more obligations to you as an employee with a disability, and they need to make reasonable adjustments. And so there's a whole section there. But sometimes, often, people are making flexible working requests because of caring responsibilities, which generally fall on women. And so sex discrimination is often an element where we see flexible working requests coming up quite a bit. And in this case, it was indirect sex discrimination. I can dive into, there's actually 6 types of discrimination. I think most people just think of discrimination as being like, you're pregnant, so I'm sacking you, which is one of the 6, but there's lots of other ones, like a policy can discriminate against a group of people, and that's indirect discrimination. But if you want to dig into how can flexible working requests intersect with discrimination law, I would take a screenshot of this one as well and read through this judgment. It's more dense. Like this is definitely like your starter pack, and this is like, advanced, but this will give you a much clearer idea of how discrimination law can help you if you need to enforce a flexible working request or if you believe that they unfairly, because of a protected characteristic, said no. So yeah, that's my little spiel over there, Katie.
Okay, so that's super helpful. I just have one question relating to that, which is really an interesting one, which I think that people would be interested in the answer to, which is I love this intersection with discrimination piece, because one of the big questions is when you're making a flexible working request, should I say what my reasons are?
Mm.
And you don't have to, but based on what you just said, there could be valid reasons for saying what they are in terms of then you having. So I just was interested in your view on that.
Yeah, if there's this perennial question of like, do I disclose
Yeah,
a disability? Do I disclose something?
yeah,
Because the reason we have protections against protected characteristics is because people tend to discriminate against you if you have them.
exactly.
And so, yeah, it is a real double-edged sword. But I do think from a legal perspective, if you are making the request for a reason that relates to a protected characteristic, you are stronger legally by including that protected characteristic as the reason.
100%. Love that.
Yeah.
Okay, that's
And
such
then
good
your
advice.
circumstances will vary, but it gives you, yeah, it just gives you that extra oomph. I'll just add one other thing. One of the other types of discrimination is something called victimization. So if you raise so let's say you made a flexible working request because you have caring responsibilities as a woman, and they not only just like blow you off, but then they have a policy that says no remote working at all for anyone, and you raise a complaint and you say this is not fair to women, then that is what's called a protected act. Complaining about discrimination at work is protected. And if you then get punished for like raising that, say they think, oh, you're a troublemaker, you're not going to get that promotion or something like that, that's called a detriment. And that is victimization, which is another type of discrimination. So there are more protections than people like know about typically, but the protections are there because it puts you more at risk to disclose.
Amazing. There's so much value. See, even from this session, how much we're learning. And it's like there's this vacuum, I think, of knowledge, and the law is so hard to navigate. And
Yes,
so I think people don't understand actually just having access to this kind of explanation and understanding just takes you into such a better position in terms of understanding how to manage the issues that you're having and whether, there is whether what your rights are. So there's just this huge amount that you can be doing before you even talk to a lawyer. So
totally.
and
Like
that's the
for
value.
me,
And I just think it's so yeah, go on.
it's always it's so me. I'm obsessed with informed choices. Like,
Correct.
yeah,
It's like
it's
just be informed and then you can make your decisions. But like if
yeah,
you don't know what you don't know, then how are you going to move forward? And it's like, you don't want to just jump in straight into spending loads of money on getting advice when you don't have a case. And so this is such an incredible way to access knowledge. And that's what I love about this. Okay, so I think we're going to dive in now to some questions. What I
yeah,
want to say to the people who have come in live, you may be here because you asked questions in advance, but if you're not and you do have a burning question, do pop them in the chat because if we don't get time for them today, Valla will come back to you by email and answer your questions. So if you're happy to put them in the chat, do that. We'll try and get to them, but we're going to cover the ones that were submitted in advance, and then you'll all get an answer. They will come back to you. So I'm going to start with question number one, which is my firm mandates 3 days a week in the office, but I work with clients in the US and Europe, which means working outside of my UK contractual hours. I'm just going to say that Danae is not a lawyer. So, just as a caveat here, we just need to say she is not a lawyer. So, we're going to cover what we can here. And anything that's not covered will come back to you in more detail on email. So, Danae, do you just want to take this one away first?
yeah. This is one where I definitely want the team to come back with a little bit more detail. Because yeah, I know a lot of employment law, but I'm definitely I'm not like the coaches who are in the cases day
Yeah.
in and day out. So this to me, I think is a breach of contract question. And it's very dependent for this person on what their contract actually says. And so there's two elements of breach of contract. Breach of contract itself can apply from any time in your employment, but then you get like a super special breach of contract after 2 years called constructive dismissal, which really is just fundamentally a breach of contract. And so I'll briefly talk about that. So if, depending on what your employer says in the contract about the your UK hours, if they are making you move wildly out of that, then you might already have a breach of contract kind of issue claim, and you might be able to kind of, it's not perfect because if it was always that way and you signed up for it to be that way, the contract said something's different, it means the contract is a little bit weaker to enforce. But if it changed, then it's a little bit stronger. So again, very context dependent. If you have worked at a company for over 2 years, constructive dismissal is tricky because it means that they have changed the circumstances of your employment so dramatically, so out of line with what's called the like the implied terms and conditions, the stuff that isn't even written down, that you can is no longer tenable for you to work there. But if they're making more and more and more demands on you that are just untenable, then you've worked at the company for over 2 years, that might also be something you want to look into. But for this one, I'll leave that one there and then say the team will come back to you with any other angles on that one.
Okay, so we'll share that email address and they'll come back to you directly.
Yeah,
Okay,
they're
so the
called
next one is what should you do and not do at a gross misconduct appeal hearing regarding an accidental data breach?
Well, first, let's talk about what gross misconduct is. Because again, this is tied to your right against unfair dismissal. And that right is a 2-year right now. We just found out that it is going to be a 6-month right as of the 1st of January, 2027. So this will get better later, which is great. Um, but your right against unfair dismissal means that your employer can't dismiss you without having a fair reason and following a fair process. So the misconduct, the disciplinary process, one of is matched to a reason. So one of the fair reasons is conduct, and the other one is capability. There's one that's like statutory, there's redundancy, and then there's this really awkward one that's like any other substantial reason, which is kind of their get out reason. But the conduct reason kind of has two parts to it. There's conduct, as in something has happened and we need to raise it. We need to tell you that you're on warning. We need to have a disciplinary process. And if you do it again, we might be able to lawfully sack you. And then there's gross misconduct, which is a much higher bar, which is basically we don't have to follow this longer process. We can just we can just dismiss you because we believe that it has kind of reached this additional level. Now, the gross misconduct bar is very high for good reason because it kind of skips all of those different steps. And an accidental data breach, depending on the circumstances and things like that, may or may not meet that. But usually when I see gross misconduct, it's like, fraudulent behavior, like abusive behavior, like, stuff like that. So at an appeal, I think the thing that you really want to do is, first of all, if you have a handbook, you really want to carefully look at what are they saying counts as gross misconduct and how are they justifying this. The other thing you want to do is go and look, as I showed you those cases earlier, go into the gov.uk database and search for gross misconduct and find cases where the judge is discussing, does this amount to gross misconduct? And better understand that. Because if they are being lazy and calling something gross misconduct, which really doesn't reach that bar, then if you're dismissed on that basis, then you have an unfair dismissal claim potentially. So in the hearing, before the hearing, as much of that as you can know is great to know. You want to be cooperative in a hearing. You want to answer questions. When you do an appeal, you want to say why you don't think it reaches that threshold, that bar. So you could say, it was accidental. Like here are examples where accidental cases, for example, don't meet the bar. But try to be cooperative because that will help you if it becomes more legal later on. And try to have, I would suggest, your notes written out in front of you and make sure that you've got someone with you to take notes of everything that is said because it's going to be really hard for you to advocate for yourself and, keep track of who said what and everything
100%.
else later on.
Yeah, great advice. Okay, so let's cover, can you lay people off with no warning during their probationary period or after it?
Oh, probationary period is the
I
bane of my
know.
existence. So the first thing about probationary periods, I have a real bugbear about this, is your probationary period has nothing to do with your statutory rights as an employee. There is no, when the new employment rights bill was coming through, it was looking like they might put a probationary period into law, but they didn't. So probationary periods are just contractual. They have nothing to do with statutory rights. So that's the first thing to know. So this myth that your employer can sack you for any reason during your probationary period is absolutely not true because your probationary period doesn't have anything to do with your statutory rights. Really, it's the 2-year limit that determines whether you have some rights or all of your rights. But you still have a ton of rights during your probationary period, because remember, that doesn't matter, up until 2 years. So it doesn't matter if it's month 3, month 9, month 11, or month 23. It's only after month 24 that it starts to matter what your additional rights are. And those rights are your right to request flexible working from day one, your right to not be discriminated against, your right to whistleblow, your right to join a union and organize unions. There's tons of day one rights that most people just don't know that they have. And it's after the 2 years. So in some ways, right now, we all have a 2-year probationary period to get all of our rights, which is the additional rights of unfair dismissal, constructive dismissal, and fairer redundancies. But so can you lay people off with no warning during the probationary period? You can make them redundant, but you better not be doing it for a discriminatory reason, because they blew the whistle on some kind of public safety or fraud issue, because they requested flexible work. So that's the difference of what you can do before and after 2 years. Does that answer that question for you, Katie?
Yeah, I think what's really interesting there is this thing around day one rights. I think that people don't know what their day one rights are. So if you've got something maybe on the platform that we can
Yeah.
push people to, I think people don't know what they're right. I think people just think that within those first probationary period, you can just be got rid of. But what you're saying is no, actually, if it falls into X number of categories or criteria, then you have got rights, and we need to know what those are. And again, that's like a lack of knowledge piece. So if we can
We
push people to that, amazing.
we actually did a survey about this. So we did a YouGov survey and we asked how many people believe that an employee in Britain can be fired for any reason before 2 years. And 33% of people thought that was true, that you can be
Yeah,
fired
I
for
think most
any
people do.
reason.
I
And
talk to
another
people
22,
every day, Danae, who say, "Oh, they've got rid of me within within the 2 years, and I've got no rights." It's like
yeah,
actually, you may have. So this is where having access to knowledge is so key.
yeah, totally, yeah. So yeah, we'll
Yeah,
definitely put a link
love
in
that.
and can
Absolutely
give you
love
some
that. And
resources.
actually, I'm learning stuff here too, so I'm enjoying this while I'm
This is
listening.
brilliant.
I know. Right. So I switched to part-time due to health. My work cannot be done well in my hours and may reflect in my appraisal get grade. What can I do to make sure I'm assessed fairly? Great question.
Yeah, really good question. There's two. So I'm talking a lot about these 6 types of discrimination. So let me just
Yeah.
list them for you because two of them come into play here. So the first one is direct discrimination, which is A treats B badly because B has a protected characteristic. And there's 9 protected characteristics. And you know about most of them. We can cover off in a different thing, the ones you don't know about.
Yeah.
Um, so that's the classic, of like villain discrimination. The second one we've covered, which is a policy discriminates against a group of people who share a protected characteristic. And so a no flexible working policy, for example, would definitely discriminate against people with disabilities and sex at a minimum. The third one is victimization, which we've talked about as well. That's when you complain about potential discrimination and you then get punished for it. The fourth and the fifth, I'm forgetting one, but it'll come back to me. The fourth and the fifth are both for disability in particular. The first one is a failure to make reasonable adjustments, and the fifth one is a discrimination arising from a disability. Oh, and the last one is harassment, which again I could talk about more because it's more than you think it is. Basically, harassment is bullying because of a protected characteristic or creeps. Like the two main categories. So a failure to make reasonable adjustments we've talked about. Your employer has to go through, if you say, I have a disability and I need some changes made in order for me to do my job, they need to jump through some hoops and really try to accommodate that.
Yeah.
More hoops than they need to jump through for flexible working. And it sounds like that's probably part of what's happened in this particular scenario. The other one is called discrimination arising from a disability. And it's a really powerful right that most people don't know they have. And it was actually a judge who explained to me how powerful this is. So, this is basically, for example, I have ADHD and I'm late a lot.
Me
And
too.
oh, there you go. Yeah. So let's say that I was working for an employer and I was late every single day. And I had told them, look, I'm so sorry. I have ADHD. I'm going to be up to 15 minutes late, but I promise I'll make it up on the other end. Can we work on something here? And they were like, oh, whatever. And maybe they accommodated it, maybe they didn't. But then they say they then put me into a disciplinary process for
Yeah.
tardiness.
Yeah.
They're not they're not disciplining me because I have ADHD. They're disciplining me because I'm late, which
Yeah.
is something that arises from the fact that I have ADHD. So it's the second order effect. Another good example would be like, let's say you have sciatica and you can't sit for longer than a certain period in an unmodified chair, which maybe means that as a carer, you can't ride the bus to work, you have to take your car or something like that. If they punish you because of that, that is arising from. And so when I read this, what I'm thinking is if the person can't do the work well because of a part of their disability that this is arising from, on top of the failure to make reasonable adjustments, which they probably already know about, that is where I would look as well to see, do I feel like this applies in my situation? And in all of these things with disability in particular, your employer really needs to work with you to try and figure this out and see if they can figure it out. And if they don't, that's when they usually fall afoul of the law.
Okay, amazing. Okay, good advice. So next one is I think that's I stop my line manager positioning me as the difficult woman where my attention to detail is better than his. It's very
I love
specific.
this question.
I know. Crazy.
I love this question. So I can't help with the interpersonal part. If I had the answer to that one, I think I'd be a millionaire.
Yeah.
But what really jumped out to me about this question is the difficult woman part.
Yeah.
Um, So one, and I want to talk about microaggressions and subtle discrimination because I think a lot of people don't realize how much protection you have for subtle discrimination. So let's say you've got like a real old school guy boss who is just like, like women belong in the kitchen kind of type.
Yeah. Well,
He
don't sit on
never,
that chair because you may get pregnant, which is what I was told. Everyone who sits on that chair gets pregnant.
what is this? What, honestly, that's ridiculous. But let's say that they're not as overt as that, right?
Mm.
Let's say that they're wise enough to
Mm.
PC gone mad, as they describe it, that they know not to say some things. And so they're much more subtle in their behavior. And so instead, you just don't get invited to the lunches. You just don't, like, you're always told that you're difficult, but they never use any gendered language. But it's clear that because you're the woman, that's what's happening. And
Yeah.
it's not in any one situation, it's in this build-up of situations or little interactions or things like that. If you write that down, you can make a pretty solid case of discrimination to the tribunal for that. This often comes up in race discrimination, especially for racial microaggressions. So, for example, the tribunal knows that Black women in particular are microaggressed against even further and are often described as angry or aggressive, for example. And so if they're using coded language and more subtle behavior, but it's clear that it's because of that one or two protected characteristics, then subtle discrimination is still discrimination. And we have a page on the website, a few examples of subtle discrimination cases. The team can drop it in. If you've already done it, oh, they're so good. That yeah, you can kind of have a look at that. So I can't stop your line manager from positioning you that way, but you could build a case against that line manager, raise a grievance about it. If you did raise a grievance about it, you then have victimization protections as well. And the other thing that we often see is they can't help themselves but to victimize. And so even if sometimes it's harder to prove the original discrimination, but it's easier to prove the victimization that happens as a result of it, because suddenly you're being even more bullied or even more
Yeah.
excluded or something like that as a result of saying, can you please stop treating me like a weirdo just because I'm a woman, for example?
Correct. Okay. So, Rosila, I don't know if I pronounced your name right. I hope I have, or Rosilla. It's very challenging to prove bias and subtle discrimination. What evidence would stand a good chance of beyond being labeled an aggressive tone?
So the aggressive tone already, so contemporaneous notes, what I talked about right at the beginning, write down. So if your boss said to you, you're taking an aggressive tone, write down the who, what, where, when of when that conversation happened. Um, and do it in Valla, do it in a way that it's clear that you can evidence when you wrote it down. So if you wrote it down on a piece of paper, put the date at the top. And it's even better if it's in like a notebook that has, yesterday before it and the day after it. Or, email yourself, not on your work account. Email yourself so it's timestamped or put it into Vala. Because then if you build up a couple different times of them saying that, and if you are the only one getting that feedback and there is no other evidence that you are aggressive, like if everybody else is like, she's delightful, and this one guy is like, you're so aggressive, then that is how you start to build these pictures up. And that's that link that we've put in. We show some examples of how they have built up with these little tiny like little tiny snapshots to build a much bigger picture of subtle discrimination. But the key thing is write absolutely everything down.
Amazing. Okay, this kind of ties into that. So you may already have covered it, but I've had a question come in saying, how am I to deal with the owner and the boss who uses swearing every day and acts like a bully, but they're like the owner of the business, and so it's difficult like to go to HR or to manage it that way.
Yeah, it's really hard because all the answers that I'm giving you are from the legal
Yeah.
perspective. I can't tell you what's going to happen if you complain to your boss, especially if they're the owner. I can't tell you how likely you are to be punished for that. What I can tell you is if you are legally protected from that punishment, for example. But if you do have to, it's so annoying. Like when your boss is the only HR, you have to complain about your boss to your boss, which really shows the absurdity of the grievance process, I think. That, I mean, people, that's the other thing I want everyone to understand is the grievance process, you do need to go through it. You do, like, you need to try and resolve the issue internally. If you go straight to ACAS, you will be penalized financially later on by up to 25% if you won your case if you just skip straight to ACAS, unless it's like there's only a tiny few exceptions for something like, sexual assault or something like that.
Sorry, can you just cover that again, Danae? Because one of the things that comes up in the group all the time is just go and talk to ACAS. Just go and talk to ACAS
Sorry, yeah,
all the
you
time. So I'm
absolutely
really
call.
interested in understanding that.
Yeah, call ACAS. Fill your boots. Call
Yeah.
ACAS. But
Yeah.
ACAS early conciliation. So, oh, here's the other thing. I have so much to tell you. So, ACAS early conciliation is the escalation point. It's like the pre-tribunal thing. And the critical thing that most people, in fact, we know that only 5%, because again, we did a survey, only 5% of workers in Britain know that it is 3 months minus 1 day after the bad thing happens that you need to start ACAS early conciliation in order to preserve your legal right to take them to tribunal later if you want to. And that's not 3 months minus 1 day after you file the grievance or 3 months minus 1 day, but you're still waiting to hear for the grievance. So you'll wait. No, it's 3 months minus 1 day after the bad thing happens. Now, sometimes when it comes to discrimination, it can be like the bad thing keeps happening. And so you can kind of say the most recent bad thing happened. But generally, and you can email us about it and we'll explain it more for your circumstances. But ACAS early conciliation is filling out a form on their website and saying, if we don't sort this out, I'm going to take you to tribunal. I want to get a conciliator involved and I want to try and sort this out, usually to settle. Call ACAS for free advice. Fill your boots. That's brilliant. You can do that all the time. But going to ACAS, if you don't do the grievance process before going to ACAS, if you then subsequently won, they could penalize you by up to 25%
So
because the
interesting.
tribunal wants to see that you've tried. But the thing is, don't listen, like, look into my eyes, everyone. Do not believe an employer if they come back and they say, we didn't do anything wrong. Because the only person that really gets to decide if that was illegal or not, if there's a legal element to it, is the tribunal. And you
Yeah.
have every right as a person, as a citizen, you have every right to say, I disagree and I'd like to hear it from the judge, please. And so don't let an employer pretend that they are the
They
final
know the
say.
law and they know that they're in the right. 100%. Okay, this is absolutely brilliant. And actually, in the chat, we're getting love brilliantly. Linda is in the chat from Valla, and she's posting and sharing all of the different documents and guidance that you can access for free on the Valla website. So there's tons of resource there for you. So just tap into some of that because there's so much there that's coming in. It's brilliant. So there's so much for you to tap into. Okay, I don't think I'm going to ask any more live questions now because I know that you also, before we close, we're just going to talk about the Employment Rights Bill, which is coming in. And I just thought it'd be useful before we close just to cover that off briefly.
Yeah.
And then the other questions that have come in, we're going to send to Valla and they will come back to you directly. I think that rather than just keep going because they're specific to people. So we've covered the ones that were submitted. There are a couple of more that we will come back to you. But if you've got time, Danae, it'd be just great if you could just, because there's lots of change coming with this employment rights bill. And I think people just want to understand what that means and how it impacts.
Absolutely. First, I'll focus on what is changing for flexible working requests
Yeah,
specifically, and then I'll talk you, if we've got just another minute, I'll talk you quickly through wider changes. So the first thing specific to flexible work requests. So remember that I said that an employer has like 6 reasons that they can say no, and it's kind of easy for them to say no. They're making it slightly less easy. They're making it a little bit harder for the employer to say no. So the thing that they have added on is that they have to have, it has to be reasonable for them to say no. It's this reasonableness test. And this is the same as the reasonable adjustments for disability. It basically means that they can't just tick a box and say, oh, it's too inconvenient, it's going to cost the business too much money, gone. They need to show that they actually tried to work out how much money it was going to cost, for example. And then they have to communicate to you and say, right now they still have to communicate to you and say, oh, it's going to cost too much money, but they don't have to justify it. Now they after, as of 2027, they will have to justify it and say, it's going to cost too much money. We thought about this, we thought about that, and therefore no, for
we've
example.
made an effort basically. We haven't just come back and fobbed you off. They've actually got
Exactly.
to do it. Yeah,
Exactly. And we see the failure to make reasonable adjustments claim. It is amazing how many employers cannot clear the bar of just working it through and deciding against it instead of just like smashing the no button.
yeah,
So that should beef up this right pretty
amazing.
considerably, actually.
That's
So
going to
yeah,
make a really big difference.
I'm excited about that.
Yeah, me too.
The cap is still 8 weeks pay, so it's still not like the largest type of compensation, but 8 weeks pay is 8 weeks pay. So it doesn't mean you're guaranteed to get all 8 weeks. Like you need to justify a little bit for that, but it definitely beefs up this right, which is super exciting. The other changes that are coming through. So I'll ask Linda to drop. This is the printed version of this report that we did, and this has a lot of this is the YouGov survey that we did, but we also go through the new bill and we talk about what's coming, and we also explain some things that people don't know about their rights and stuff in here. But in terms of the new things that are coming through, the number one most important thing that is changing, and it's been a bit of a political football, but it is now, it looks like the Commons are debating it on Monday. I have I have inside knowledge that we're pretty li it's pretty likely to actually land, is your right against unfair dismissal is moving from that 2 year mark, which means that the whole nation was kind of on a 2 year probationary period, at least for that right. That's going to come down to 6 months of service.
Wow, that's a huge change.
Yeah, it was supposed to be day one, and it was a big deal that they compromised and moved it to 6 months, but it basically meant that they could get the rest of the bill through. So great. 6 months is going to be amazing.
Yeah,
That will be as of the 1st of January 2027, which means that anyone who starts a job on or before, I think it's like July the 1st, 2026, will have that right in place from that start date of January 2027, which is great. It means that we're only 6 months away, roughly, from this starting to kind of collect people to have that right when it comes into effect. That means that your employer needs to have a fair reason and follow a fair process in order to sack you once that 6 month timeline starts. And as we have learned, they're terrible at both. And so that's really going to beef up. It's going to be a real burden on the employers because they're actually going to have to care about like a fair process. But that's a really big, exciting one. There's a
yeah,
few other things around 0 hour contracts. Those are getting the worst kind of offenders of those are going down, which is really important. There's some more work around harassment to make that to beef that up as well. But I think the day one right is the key thing for people to know. And if you take nothing else from this webinar, you have rights before 6 months or before 2 years. When this new law comes in, you will still have rights before 6 months. They're called day one rights, and they are very powerful. And so that doesn't change those. You still have those day one rights. It just means that you get additional rights way faster.
yeah. I mean, it's amazing. People start work and have absolutely no idea what their rights are, and just unpacking this today and like actually how much knowledge is power in this type of situation. Like it's just insane how much you're imparting just in this 45, an hour session
Yeah,
that just gives people leverage that they just wouldn't have.
that's exactly
Um,
it. Leverage.
yeah, it's leverage, isn't it? Like pretty much. Okay, so I think we're gonna close there. I want to leave by just saying a huge thank you to Danae. Like I feel like you just like exploded your brain into our webinar and you have so much knowledge, but that's just the tip of the iceberg because they've got all the ton of coaches, they've got all the tons of resources, like amazing access to knowledge. And so if you have a question for Valla, then please email hello@valla.uk. Please note there is no co-UK, it is .uk. People make that mistake. So it's Valla, hello@valla.uk. So please, there's tons of links here. So if you're watching this on replay, those should be there available for you to click through. Otherwise, head to the Valla website. We've got a link that we're going to drop in, and we're promoting Valla all the time in the group, and also they're in our flexible working community, so you can access them at any point. But this has been a brilliant session. I'm so excited to have you guys as part of our world. I think it's essential that people have knowledge and are able to know their rights, because with that, you can make informed decisions. And just to make it accessible, I think that just it's not been accessible up until now. So like, yay to what you're doing. I absolutely love it. And from the moment I started talking to Jade in your organization, I was just like, I just need to be a part of this because our people need this. So it's just brilliant to have you in our community and in our world. So
It's brilliant
everybody
that
who's listening,
it's
sorry,
brilliant that the community exists as well. So thank you, Katie.
yeah, like together, I think that we're gonna like make change, and that's what I think we're both set up our businesses and our world to do. So thank you so much, everybody who listened. Thank you for those who took the time out of your day today to join us live. We love that. And for anyone watching on replay, we hope that you found this session really useful. And obviously tap into all of the assets that Valla has to offer you. And I just wanted to ask, if people do want to actually speak to one of the coaches straight away, they can
Hmm.
do that. They can just go and we'll send links and they can book in a session with one of your coaches and
Yeah.
start, because people have got issues that
All
they want. Yeah.
So all you have to do is create a free account and then go into the account and just click on coaching on the left, and you'll see all the booking options. And if you want to know, do I have a case? Just go to the homepage. It's even easier. Just go to the homepage. You'll see a live availability tracker, and you can click to buy and then book.
Brilliant. Okay, so if you head off there on your own, then the website is Valla. What is it?
Valla.uk.
Valla.uk. That's the website as well. Otherwise, we'll be dropping in all of our links and sharing them within the community and within all of our comms. All right. So, Danae, have a great rest of day. Everybody else, have a great rest of day. Thank you so much for joining. It's been a really fantastic session, and everybody enjoy your Fridays and your weekend.
Thank you so much, Katie. It's been
Thank
a
you so
real
much.
pleasure. See you
Thank you.
later.
Fabulous. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.